What are the odds of a player finding their best tennis months before their retirement? Well, to be fair, some of the legends of our sport retired when they were either at the top or pretty close. Ash Barty, Kim Clijsters, Justine Henin, Marion Bartoli, Bjorn Borg on the men's side, and a few others. And now we have Danielle Collins. But taking a look at the WTA's 50-year history, you would be hard-pressed to draw any other parallels to what Collins has achieved this year and in her entire career. It's time we talked about Danielle Collins.
I think everyone has a different way they envision going out with their career, but I want to go out playing my best tennis.
In order to find answers to Danielle's unbelievable form on the court, her future plans, and some strange opinions that others have about her, I did a little bit of research and even had the chance to talk to her myself. Now, let me tell you, I was a little bit surprised with what I found. It's January 2019, and a 25-year-old unseeded American takes down 3 top 20 players en route to a semifinal appearance at the Australian Open. Oh, and she also destroyed the second seed Angelique Kerber 6-love, 6-2 along the way. No one saw that coming, and for good reason. Although she had made a name for herself as a stellar collegiate player and won national titles in 2014 and 2016, Danielle Collins had not won any main draw match at any Grand Slam. In fact, she only turned pro at 22 years old.
At 18 years old, I had $0 in my name. I didn't come from financial opportunity. And knowing that, I really felt like the best way to set myself up for success was going to college.
So in addition to turning pro very late, Collins had to settle for first-round losers checks in all of her previous 5 main draw appearances. To be fair, Danielle was coming off the back of her best year on tour, having reached the semis of the Miami Open and broken into the top 50 in 2018, so she was already on an upward trajectory. However, that semifinal run was definitely worth a database search because at the time, only 3 other women had done something similar in the entire WTA history. Monica Seles at the 1989 French Open, Jennifer Capriati at the French Open the following year, and Alexandra Stevenson at Wimbledon in 1999. We shouldn't even be making these comps because those players were prodigies running tables as teenagers. But here was Collins at 25. If only we knew then that it was a foreshadowing of what was to come. That semifinal run was even more significant because really there were no precedents for Collins on the women's side. On the men's side, we saw Kevin Anderson and John Isner establish themselves in the top 10 and go deep at majors, but on the women's side, it was always skewed towards much younger players, with the 20-year-old Naomi Osaka being the poster girl at the time. But then, as a player in her mid-20s at the time, Collins reminded everyone that college could fit in the plans of a would-be WTA star. The Florida native did reach the French Open quarterfinal the following year, upsetting Garbiñe Muguruza along the way. But her first WTA title only came in 2021 after she'd been sidelined for the first half of the season after she was diagnosed with endometriosis. Collins had a surgery for the condition and also started taking medications for yet another chronic medical condition, rheumatoid arthritis. Now, most of us would have retired straight away with those conditions, but the Danimal herself raged against the storm, and come 2022, she had now reached the Australian Open final. Collins was playing the best tennis of her life and had beaten Iga Swiatek in straight sets in the semis. After the match, Iga said this.
And it's kind of hard to stop an opponent when they're playing like that.
Danielle lost that final to Ash Barty, but her performances propelled her into the top 10, and she had now become the American #1 overall. What a turnaround. Unfortunately, there was a downtick for the rest of the year, and 2023 didn't bring much success either. But here we are in 2024, watching Collins play her best tennis ever. The canon event came at the Australian Open when Collins announced her plans to retire at the end of the season following her second-round loss to Iga Swiatek. At the beginning of February, Collins was already outside the top 70. She then managed to crawl back inside the top 50 after a decent run to the quarterfinals in Doha. After playing decently well at the ATX Open, where she was ultimately limited by a back injury, she followed that performance with yet another loss to Swiatek in Indian Wells. But then everything changed in Miami. Collins annihilated everyone she faced in straight sets, not dropping more than 5 games in each match en route to the final. Facing Rybakina in the final, Collins was actually the underdog, but she came up clutch and won that final in straight sets. That was it, a first WTA 1000 title and the biggest title of her career since San Jose in 2021. Collins then followed her Miami title run with yet another crazy title run in Charleston. I have to say, I didn't see this one coming because Danielle was unseeded, yet she ended up taking down the number 2, 3, and 4 seeds in the tournament. Collins dropped only one set the entire tournament as she racked up another 500 points in the rankings. Now, Danielle, who started February being outside the top 70, had now found herself inside the top 15 in just 2 months. We gotta love tennis, right? After making deep runs in Madrid and Rome, Collins has now returned to the top 10 after she just reached the final in Strasbourg. What an amazing story. What a journey. But you might be wondering, what's the secret to her success? To be fair, Collins has always been capable of catching fire every once in a while. She just wasn't consistent with those performances. When asked what changed on Andy Roddick's Served podcast, here's what Danielle said.
And hitting those shots accurately in big moments and having the confidence to do it. That's been the biggest game changer, I think, for me, is those shots that I used to miss, I've been hitting more consistently.
I noticed that unlike before, the fire in Danielle's eyes was also accompanied by a new sense of focus, patience, and purpose on every point. She's managed to hang tough even when things haven't been going her way, and I really think that since announcing her retirement, she's just been playing much more free off the ball. But how does this translate to her game on court? Since announcing her retirement at the Australian Open this year, Danielle has only lost 8 matches. 5 of those matches were either to Swiatek, Rybakina, or Sabalenka. The other 3, a retirement due to physical issues against Wang Xiyu at the ATX Open, a narrow quarterfinal loss to Pavlyuchenkova in Doha, and most recently the loss to a red-hot Madison Keys in the final in Strasbourg. In my opinion, only Swiatek, Sabalenka, and Rybakina have had better seasons than Collins this year. She's 4th in the WTA race at the moment, and she's number 5 on the ELO ranking. A closer look at the Danimals game might help us to understand just what has changed. Let's start with the serve. This year, the only top players to have gotten more from their first serves than Danielle are Rybakina, Sabalenka, and Zheng Qinwen. But that's not even the main gist. The biggest take-home from Collins' game is understanding how she transforms into a beast on the return. I remember watching Paula Badosa win only 6 out of a possible 21 second serve points against Danielle in Charleston. Badosa made many double faults, and it was easy to understand why. If you decide to play it safe, Collins will destroy you every time. And when you go big, you're at risk of making those double faults. She just has the ability to put her opponents between a rock and a hard place on their second serves. If you held the racket ready to serve and Collins was on the other side of the net, what would you do? You see, the average WTA top 50 player has a win percentage on the second serve return of 55%, and Danielle has cracked the code, winning 60% of her second serve return points. Only Iga Swiatek can boast of a similar stat among the current top 10 players. But even at that, Iga is more nuanced on her return. She can handle a variety of serves and rack up points when she lets rallies develop. I talk a lot more in detail about Iga's game and just what makes her so effective in our latest deep dive. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. However, for Danielle, she sometimes struggles to put first serves back in play when she can't take a big swing. It's for this same reason Collins is actually among the worst returners of first serves in the top 50. And really, it might be one of the reasons she struggles against those hard serves from Sabalenka. When playing Danielle, you just have to be clutch on your spot serving the first time, or you're pretty much toast. Don't believe me? Have a look for yourself.
Wow.
The quality of Danielle's return was on full display again against Angelina Kalinina in the semis in Strasbourg.
Oh, when she takes it.
Looking at the return aggregate and rally aggression score from matches charted on Tennis Abstract, Collins is only behind Ostapenko, Sabalenka, and Ludmila Samsonova in the top 20 players. And in case you were wondering, return aggregate and rally aggression scores are simply metrics used to determine just how aggressive you are during rallies. While Collins doesn't serve and volley as much and only slices occasionally, she's great at what she does, which is destroying second serves with one of the best backhands on tour, and also with that trademark inside-out forehand that's just as deadly. There is no doubt that this has been her best year ever on tour, and is this the reason why some fans are gutted that she says she's retiring at the end of the season?
It's like, this is my personal choice, and this is so much more to do than just tennis.
Yep, you heard that. Collins has explained a number of times that her decision to retire is personal and also has a lot to do with some of the other things she wants to do in life, like having a baby and starting a family. I'm not going to go too in depth here because I already feel like it's been talked about repeatedly. Also, Danielle doesn't exactly love the hectic traveling around every week and the stress that comes with it. She's at a point where life on tour just doesn't quite fulfill her anymore. I personally think she's going to stick to her word and retire at the end of the season, but who knows? Collins will turn 31 in December. Maybe there's a slight possibility that she takes like a couple of years off to pursue those other goals and then maybe comes back to the tour for one last dance. Maybe, I don't know. What do you guys think? Well, I asked myself the same question. Danielle has gone through long periods of time in her career without a coach, but based on her personality and temperament, you would think that she would do even better on the court if she did have one. However, Collins herself doesn't think so. She says that she prefers to figure things out on her own. Personally, I think it might be safe to assume that she just doesn't see all that much value in having a full-time coach traveling with her, especially at this point in her career. Speaking about the situation, here's just what Danielle had to say about traveling with the team.
It's just finding the balance. And I think with me, I don't like the feeling of having an entourage around me. I had times where I did have like a full team with me, and well, there were some great memories and I enjoyed parts of it. It's a lot easier when you just have to worry about yourself.
I feel like Collins is one of those self-directed people who actually gets better when she's on her own. Of course, she'd appreciate an extra pair of eyes and ears from time to time, but ultimately she'd rather have things her way. And I have to mention, having things her way isn't something that's always gone down well with fans. This brings us to the elephant in the room. Yeah, I get it. I understand where this one is coming from. Telling Sakari to shut her mouth. A not-so-pleasant exchange at the net with Gabriela Elena Roos in Hamburg. Those frequent exchanges with fans.
Too on edge.
And you do what I do, okay? Have a little more respect.
Telling the cameraman to back up.
It's win number 32.
Those maximum volume screams of "come on" when she wins points. Commanding her coaches and saying stuff like "stand up" and "talk to me." I've seen those moments as well. I'm not going to play the devil's advocate here, but let's address the issues one after the other. Players having exchanges with their coaches in the heat of the moment is relatively common in tennis. It's sometimes not the best way to go about things, but it happens and many players are guilty of it. It's the same thing with the screaming. Agreed, some fans can't stand it, however, many other fans also struggle with the really loud grunts and screams from many other players on the tour. I'm not naming names, but you get the point. Getting yourself fired up on the court shouldn't be a crime, especially when you're not doing it to disrespect opponents. For the camera part, not everyone is really comfortable with cameras being up close, and we need to respect that. Even Roger Federer once told the cameraman to get out of his face when he came close. So again, it happens. Now I can't explain those encounters with Sakari and Roos. Obviously, those ones didn't look pretty. But the point I'm trying to make here is that professional tennis players live their lives in the public eye, which isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. It's really easy for us fans to draw different lines in the sand and judge players based on a moment of weakness or not being on their best behavior. These emotions, the adrenaline from wanting to win so badly, means that our favorite players aren't always going to be 100% perfect on the court, and that's really okay. But we should also remember that the time they spend on the court is only a fraction of their entire lives. So we shouldn't judge them from only what we see on camera alone. If we do, I can guarantee you that we're going to find faults with almost every player at some point. Here's what Danielle said about her on-court attitude during an interview.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you can do the right thing 99.9% of the time. But whenever there is that 0.1% where you're a little fiery or a little spicy or you stick up for yourself when it's warranted, people love to, give you a hard time for it.
But everything changes when you encounter Danielle Collins off the court. She's smiley and bubbly and also surprisingly cool and laid back. From going the extra mile in media opportunities to just taking that extra moment to talk and ask how you are, let me tell you, Danielle is truly special. Her authentic personality is one of the many reasons she's well liked on the WTA Tour, and I think that this is something that fans are going to remember even when she calls time on the sport. We'll also remember her competitive fire and fighting spirit. Having battled 2 chronic medical conditions and fought through every obstacle she's faced, Collins is a great example of what tenacity and self-belief looks like. What predictions can we make for the remainder of the year? Danielle is now 23-3 since the start of Miami, her only losses coming to Aryna Sabalenka twice in Madrid and Rome, and most recently to Madison Keys. Do I think she can win a Grand Slam? Yes, I would consider her a dark horse, particularly at the US Open. But the truth is that apart from the Australian Open, Collins hasn't made it past the 3rd round at the French Open and Wimbledon, and she hasn't made it past the 4th round at the US Open. Yet, we are in this rare zone where Danielle Collins has made us believe that anything is possible with her. If Collins stays at her current level and remains healthy, I see her making a deep run at least one of the slams. Who knows, maybe she needs to give herself another deadline because she always seems to bring out her best tennis when she's on the clock. Collins is also 4th in the WTA race, so she'll also be keeping an eye out on the WTA finals where she'd be looking to make her debut. She's also now into her 20th career week in the top 10, having spent the first 19 weeks there in 2022. So the point is, there's still a lot to look forward to in what's already been a super eventful career. But what are your thoughts on Danielle Collins, and what are your expectations of her in the coming tournaments? As a player, announcing your retirement on a stage as big as the professional tennis tour could come with a huge burden, and the feeling that you need to go out with a bang. But for Collins, it's done just the opposite. Her announcement has seemed to free her of any pressure, and with the finish line in sight, she no longer cares about the results as much. She just goes about swinging and giving it her all. Collins continues to ride the hot hand, and at this point, it's safe to say that many of us fans are rooting for her. Her place in the history books is already set in stone, and we're certainly all going to remember her for her fighting spirit. If you love this video, please hit that subscribe button and help us towards our goal of 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And if you want to see any other topics from around the tours covered or any other deep dives, be sure to let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep going for the lines.